What's going on, all you Minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, and join me today for my advance look at the Hellions hardcover from Marvel Comics. So, let's get started. Before getting started, I do want to give a huge thank you to the folks at Marvel and David Gabriel for sending us an advance copy of this oversized hardcover. Now, this book is due out in the direct market and book market. Well, we have a date of October 25th right now. That might move around and it might move up. We've seen that happen before. Hopefully it'll come out before then. But so many of you have been asking me, where's the advance overview? Where is it? When is it coming? And, well, it's here. So let's talk about this book. First of all, let's look at this cover here that features Havoc, one of the lead characters, with his iconic, well, sort of a take on his classic costume there, but his big iconic move right there, his signature move. Here's what the spine looks like. Marvel, Hellions, Wells, Segovia, Curiel, and Beredo. And then the back of the book right here. This again designed by Tom Mueller. I love these designs. They look so awesome and they stand out on the shelves. We'll look at that here in a second. But here, the big thing is that this collects Hellions 1 through 18. Every solicitation I've seen of this says that it collects issues 1 through 4 and then 7 through 18. But no, this collects everything in its entirety. As a matter of fact, I just reread it a couple of days ago. So everything is in here intact. It does give you a parental advisory warning. Give you a little breakdown as to what you're going to find in here, the creators, and the retail price of $75. Now, where am I going to put this if I doing a reading order? Where's this going to fit? Well, this is where I'm putting it. So I'm putting it right after the Hellfire Gala, even though it starts, of course, before then, and X of Swords. But I feel like this ends after the Hellfire Gala, but before Inferno begins. So this is where I'm putting it. I just love the way all of these books look on the shelf. This era of X-Men really does stand out. I love what Tom Mueller has done here. Now, the stories that we're going to find in here have been previously collected in a series of 3 trade paperbacks, Volume 1, Volume 2, and 3, but these leave out the X of Swords story. So issues 5 and 6 are not collected in here. They are collected in here. Underneath the dust jacket is the same design that we've seen underneath the dust jackets of the other Krakoa era books. Kind of give you an idea of what it looks like there. It's just Hellions. Alright, we're going to crack this open. I am going to talk a little bit about issue 1 and some of the returning characters and a little bit of background behind them, because some of you have been asking me so many questions about some of the characters that just pop in and when they came back and what exactly is happening. So there might be talk of a little bit of spoilers for the first 2 issues, just a little bit, but mostly kind of catching people up to speed on these particular characters that show up through here. But just as a heads up, minor spoilers may be coming up. Keep me on mute in case you just want to look at the pretty pictures. No, actually, you know what? That's not going to work either, because I'm going to show some of the art, and some of the art immediately shows you who returns in the pages of the first couple of issues. So just in case then, minor spoilers. Okay, so cracking this open, here is what your end paper looks like. Hellions, and here are all the credits. The writer, Seb Wells, who wrote the entire thing. Steven Segovia, who drew a majority of the issues in here, but he does get some help from time to time. You have Carmen Carnero doing a fill-in issue, and Zach Carlos is the one that does the final issue with Steven. Roge Antonio also doing issues 13 through 15. Here's your color artist, the letters, and then of course the cover art. The head of X, Jonathan Hickman, the design of the book, Tom Mueller, and then you've got the assistant editors and editors there, and there we go, Hellions, kicking it off with a quote from our blue, furry, fuzzy elf. It is folly to create an Eden if one has no use for snakes. I love that quote. As a matter of fact, each issue kicks off with a quote from Nightcrawler. So then we kind of get a little bit of background as to what's going on and why there's a need for the Hellions. Now, Hellions have been a group of characters that have existed since the days of the New Mutants. They were all led by Emma Frost. There were also Hellions during the era of the Nunzo and Phillips, and then, of course, Kyle and Yost during the new X-Men era. So, but this is the latest incarnation. Now, when I said I had to talk about some spoilers, there's a couple things I have to mention. Number one is the status quo of X-Men during the Krakoa era. So this is after House and Powers of X. And number two is, of course, a little bit of background here. So let's talk a little bit about the characters first, and then we're going to talk about the status quo of X-Men. So here we have the character of Havoc. And Havoc is Cyclops' brother. Now, he's going a little bit crazy here, and he is about to kill a human, almost said a human character, a human being here. And that is a big no-no. That is one of the laws that they've established in the island of Krakoa, where all the mutants are living. So they decide to have a meeting of the Quiet Council and start talking about what are they going to do with these particular characters, because they're all loose cannons. They're all a danger not just to themselves, but also the people living here. And they've already established a rule about not killing humans. There's other rules too. And the punishment for killing humans is sending them, well, you can find out for yourself by reading House and Powers of X. But you saw where they sent one of the villains that was a loose cannon and decided to keep killing. And that's where these characters might end up. But then Mr. Sinister stands up and says, wait, I'll take him under my wing. So here you have the characters of Nanny, Orphan Maker, Wild Child, Empath, the character formerly known as Scalp Hunter, and of course Havoc. Now they won't be alone, because who's going to be babysitting them is also a character that is new and old to a lot of us, and that is the character of Psylocke. Now this is Quanon Psylocke. This is what I meant when I have to kind of give a recap on some of these characters. So it is now in canon that Quanon and Betsy Braddock are two different characters. So if you just read Acts of Vengeance, that it wasn't that Spiral remolded Betsy into this ninja assassin, but instead their minds were swapped and she was an actual human being. That was all started by Fabian Nicieza and then again brought back in the pages of Uncanny by Matt Fraction, but now they are split. So we really don't know much about the character of Quanon, who she was before. You know, every time I look at her, I know old habits are hard to break. Like I think of Betsy. That was Betsy, and this is her body now. No, this is now Quanon. So that's who's here, and even Cyclops makes that statement, like, well, we really don't know much about her, but I still think she should be keeping an eye on these characters because she's been good to us lately. We have the character of Manuel de la Rocha, of course, that is Empath. He was one of the original Hellions, so as a matter of fact, if anyone has the right to call this group of characters Hellions, it should just be him. And we have Wild Child, who came from the pages of Alpha Flight. He was also a member, I think most people probably remember this costume after the Age of Apocalypse when he joined X Factor. But this is the costume he wore during the Age of Apocalypse. Now, let's talk about this character here, John Greycrow. So this is the one that I've been asked about, who exactly he is. Well, there's a character that during the Mutant Massacre was going around, and he was named Scalp Hunter. I think they've decided to just call him Greycrow now, where he's going by his Native American name. And he played a big role in that. Now, to get a little bit of his background, you have to read the pages of the Gambit ongoing series by Fabian Nicieza. See what I mean? You have to plug in these holes with some comics that not a lot of people talk about. So Gambit was an ongoing series written by Fabian Nicieza, and he developed the character of John Greycrow there a lot. So to me, this wasn't a big surprise. Like, he's acted like this before, but I've heard people saying he's acting so out of character. He was an assassin. He was a killer, but that's when Gambit comes in, and then of course we saw him in the pages of X-Men. The biggest question I had was about this character here, and that is Havoc. Why is Havoc smiling when he's about to kill a human being? And that's because of what happened in the pages of Rick Remender's Uncanny Avengers, but mainly what happened in the X-Axis storyline, where the roles were switched and he became a villain. And aspects of that are still in him. But, I mean, it's not the first time that Havoc has been messed with. He was, part of the whole Inferno saga, which is very important here. And then also, during the whole Mutant X thing, he went to another world. And then when he came back, his brain has just been mush for so many years. So it makes sense to put a character like that here. So what this team is, and then I'll talk about Nanny and Orphan Maker in a little bit. It's pretty much a team of loose cannons that are going on special missions, all led by Mr. Sinister. He has a few tasks, and the first task he wants them to do is go and destroy his old clones that are in his old mansion. So, because we are in a new era of X-Men where they don't need clones anymore. We have the 5 that can bring everybody back from the dead. With a few exceptions, of course. During the X of Swords, there were some exceptions. They laid out some some ground rules as to who could come back. And if you die in the island of Araco, sorry, no deal. And that does play a part here. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is because when we get to the big mansion, whenever we get there, we see some marauders here. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about a little bit of spoilers is because this was the big question that I was asked. How did this character come back? So here we see the Essex estate. That's Sinister's name. And we see the return of this particular character. This is Madeleine Pryor, the Goblin Queen. And up here she's hung up the Marauders, which Grey Crow was a part of at one time during the Mutant Massacre. So you see characters like Arclight there, Blockbuster Prism, Harpoon, Riptide. Maybe that's Scrambler back there. I can't tell. I think no, I just read this. Yes, it says that's Scrambler. So the character of Madeleine Pryor has an interesting history because everything comes to play at the end of Inferno, right? She's a clone of Jean Grey, Inferno. She becomes the Goblin Queen. You can read that and see how that ends. But then we hadn't seen her in so many years until the pages of X-Man, the Nate Gray character. She comes back in a really peculiar way. But this character comes back because she mentions that she's been back and Havoc didn't know. But she did appear in that Sisters... What is it? Was it the evil... The Sisterhood of Mutants, I think is what it was, with Spiral and Lady Deathstrike during Matt Fraction's run. So she did come back, even though it was a really weird way to come back. And then she was later established as a character that did come back. But now she is back, and that's how kind of she explains it. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of where and when she came back. So now she's having to deal with the Hellions that are there to destroy the mansion. And she's there kind of manipulating all of them, including the character of Havoc, who was, one time her love interest. So I thought this particular team was so cool. Try to stay, neutral when it comes to overviews, but I've said before that this is one of the best books that has come out of the Dawn of X era, the House and Powers of X. The 2 characters I didn't talk about yet are Nanny and Orphan Maker. Those are characters that first appear in the pages of X Factor. They're really obscure characters, but it's so funny because of the way that Nanny interacts with Mr. Sinister. I genuinely crack up every time they interact with each other. And Sinister, if you're old school and you've read, his classic appearance in issue 221, you read all the way through Inferno, the Executioner song, he's a little bit different here. This is more of the Karen Gillan take on Mr. Sinister in his pages of Uncanny. And we call that the sassy Sinister era. And that's exactly who he is here. As a matter of fact, this is how he is. He's talking to Exodus here about his shoulder decorations. He's like, hey, wait, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to look better than me? Are your shoulder decorations going to outdo mine? I don't think so. So that's the kind of character he is. And he sends these particular characters on these suicide missions, including during the X of Swords. And that's all the spoilers I'll talk about, by the way. During the X of Swords, they have a suicide mission to do. And because we live in this era of House and Powers of X, if you follow the rules, you can always just come back. But there are rules you have to follow. This is what the artwork mainly looks like. We have some villains that return through these pages. This isn't really like Suicide Squad, where it's a bunch of villains together working to pay off their debt to society. This is more of like people that are trying to get help and trying to get a house back in Krakoa. So this is their way of just saying, okay, I'll do this mission, and then maybe I can live a normal life with all the other mutants holding hands in the island of Krakoa. Of course, things never go the way that you think they're going to go. freaking love this series. I don't want to flip through the end there. Let's go back here. But it took me by surprise. That's the character of Tarn. So one thing they do here, I forgot to mention this, is in the pages of the X of Swords, the crossover, and also in the Hellfire Gala, you don't get a recap as to what's previously happened in X of Swords. If you want to read that whole event, that can be found in trade paperback or in that oversized hardcover. So they're just called X of Swords Part 1 and Part 2. Even when you get to the Hellfire Gala, it doesn't really tell you anything about what to read before this. They're just dressing up for a big party. And it's not like the Hellfire Gala, you know, like pages of this continue into the pages of X Factor. But I thought that was interesting, that they don't really explain what happened in the previous issues, because these are so standalone that you can just jump in there and read. And that's the other question I'm going to answer. Is this okay to read for any new reader if you're just familiar with the Dawn of X era, the Krakoa era of X-Men? Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. You get to know the characters, and in that way, you get to go and read stories you haven't before. If you want to know more about Grey Crow, you want to read how horrible, how cold he was, you go read Mutant Massacre. If you want to read about the Goblin Queen, go and read Inferno, but you want to read everything leading up to Inferno, so you want to read everything, so from the Ashes all the way up to Inferno. And same thing with all the other characters like Nanny and Orphan Maker. This type of book will make you go back and read those old stories. Do they act different? Absolutely. They've gone through hell. And actually they explain a little bit about that, like how and why they act so different. But for older readers, I think you get a lot more out of this, because there's a lot of history between a lot of these characters. Not just Maddie and Alex, but characters in here like Wild Child and Grey Crow, and or just him and all the Marauders, and him and Sinister. And then, of course, throw in Nanny and Orphan Maker. Yeah, this is a recipe for a lot of freaking laughter. Like, I laughed at... Zeb Wells is very hit and miss with me. I was not the biggest fan of his Spider-Man run. I don't know how his new Spider-Man run is going, but this blew me away. And I was not a fan of his new Warriors either, by the way. Ugh. But this completely blew me away. And I know he comes from Robot Chicken, so I know he's a funny guy. Let's look at the extras. In between the chapters, the issues, you have the covers, but they're all with a blue tone, with this blue tone that's all over the book. So in the back, it's where you get the original colors that the covers had. They're all textless, and the credits are down at the bottom. They tell you what issue they're from, and who drew it, who inked it. That is... I never realized that is after Jim Lee until I just saw that after Jim Lee. That's right. It's from X Factor 62, The Extinction Agenda. And making sure I'm not flipping. And I'm going to skip a couple because the cover spoiled the return of a couple characters. I assume that's after Liefeld. But yeah, it is. But let's keep going here. Let's look at some of the variants. So we have some variants here by Whilce Portacio. There's a Jim Lee Hidden Gem variant. It's when he created it before we even knew who or what Quanon was. There's the Goblin Queen. Gosh, her costume. Hot, hot, hot. And then, of course, the Hellfire Gala. I love the design covers. It looks so good. Well, some better than others. It's an awesome piece there by Russell Dodderman. I'm not going to go through all the variants. Just some of them. It's Phil Tan. There's a lot of Goblin Queen covers back here. Alright, let's look at the binding. 512 pages, $75, collecting issues 1 through 18. Sewn binding. This one is printed at the Donley printer for people that ask me, where is it printed? Where is it printed? It is printed at the Donley printer. The paper, because I was just reading the 7 to Eternity, thick glossy paper. It's not as thick as that, but it is as thick as the latest Donley printer books that we've had. But that's it. That is to say, Uncanny Omar Talk Pretty One Day. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this book, don't forget to check out our sponsor, CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this oversized hardcover. Let me know in the comments down below if this is the way you're going to pick it up, or if you have the trade paperbacks, or if you're okay with the Dawn and Reign of X anthology collections, or if you're hoping one day all of this will be collected in some kind of omnis. Again, this was the Uncanny Omar. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Comments, leave them down below. Smash that like button, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, check out our Patreon and Spreadshop. Amazing ways to support the channel if you can do so. And remember, everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.